Hey guys, it is Tamara. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the 10 signs that you have had a traumatic childhood. You know, this topic is a topic that has made me considered one of the experts on the topic of childhood trauma. And one of the reasons why is because I'm internationally certified as a trauma therapist, but then also because I talk a lot about this everywhere I do speaking engagements. Last year I did a couple of speaking engagements throughout the nation, and most of my topics centered around childhood trauma. It's an issue that happens a lot in families, and sadly it's an issue that gets ignored, it gets hidden, it gets minimized, and a lot of children grow up under very unhealthy parents, and then they try to emerge as adults. And that is a very difficult process for them because they lack the psychological and emotional stability that other children growing up had. So I'm going to talk about that today, but I'm going to try to keep it to 10 things that highlights that you have grown up under childhood trauma. So let's just go ahead and jump into this topic. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. For those who are subscribed and for those who are new to the channel, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button so you can stick around with us and be a part of our growing community and validating community. I love everybody that comes to this channel. They are insightful, intelligent, open. They are what's the word? Not careless, but they are very selfless. That's the word I'm looking for, guys. Very selfless. They're very selfless subscribers, and they have a community-oriented mindset, and I think that's what has built this channel to be what it is. So if you're interested in that kind of mental health environment, I encourage you to stick around with that subscribe button. If you don't know who I am, let me go ahead and briefly introduce myself. My name is Tamara, and I'm an internationally certified and board certified trauma therapist, but I'm also licensed in mental health, and I focus on a specialized group of people, on children, teens, and families, but I also work with adults who are dealing with grief, loss, and trauma. So you're going to get a lot on this channel, as you can see right around me. Everything I talk about on this channel centers around trauma, so that's what you're going to get. Let's just go ahead and jump in. So childhood trauma, I want you to think of childhood trauma as something that impacts you in a way that doesn't allow you to grow and develop and be free-spirited as you would otherwise. Children, when they come into this world, they expect that their parents are going to protect them and love them and care for them, and they expect that they're going to get fed and they're going to have their basic needs met. They also expect love and compassion, and when they don't get those things, guys, that's when the trauma begins. When the parent is negligent, when the parent is abusive, when the parent is sociopathic or psychopathic. And I talk about those particular topics right up here in these videos, and I encourage you to go ahead and click on those after this video is over and learn a little bit about the psychopathic mother and the psychopathic father. And I talk about their specific characteristics and what you need to be aware of, because I think a lot of people that come to my channel, they're looking for trauma-informed psychotherapy. And so when you go to those topics, the psychopathic mother and the psychopathic father, you're going to find specific characteristics in an ABC format that can help you identify what has happened to you. But I will say, for children who are growing up in a traumatic environment, they have a psychopathic mother most of the time, and they have a psychopathic father most of the time. If they have two normal parents, then something else has gone wrong. And I'm going to point out what those other things are. So the number one sign that you have grown up in a traumatic environment is lack of parental support. And when I say lack of parental support, I'm talking about substance abuse. I'm talking about negligence and maltreatment. I'm talking about an absent mother or father that left you behind without anyone to care for you physically and emotionally, right? I'm also talking about poor attachment. So kids who are not securely attached to their mom or to their dad. I'm talking about kids who are being raised in I'm trying to say in a house full of turmoil. I think that's the word I'm looking for. Kids who are raised in a house full of turmoil and chaos, right? Kids who are raised under parents who are permissive. These kind of parents really have no attachment to their kids to raise them. They let them do whatever they want to do. They're a dysfunctional parent-child household, or a dysfunctional parent-child relationship, or a dysfunctional parental group if it's two parents, right? That's kind of being permissive. The other thing too is personality disorders. I think that there are a lot of parents who are lacking the ability to be parents, and part of that is because they have not been raised correctly. Part of that is because they themselves have had a lack of parental support over the years. So lack of parental support has a wide reach. You know, it's not just, I don't support you at school, or I don't support your dating choices, or I don't support, something that you want to do. This is a parent who does not support your basic needs. The fact that you need love, the fact that you need compassion and emotional and psychological stability, the fact that you need to be fed and your basic needs met. This is a lack of parental support. Parents who do not give their children support tend to be emotionally detached parents and emotionally immature parents. They don't have the capabilities to be the parent that they need to be. All right. So lack of parental support. The other thing that can cause a child to grow up in a very traumatic childhood is frequent guardians. Having frequent guardians. Now, I believe in the families who involve the grandparents, and the grandparents help to raise the child or the children, and the aunts and the uncles are great support networks. I love that entrenched family system. I think that is healthy for the child. It gives the child a large repertoire of skills and experiences. And those kind of kids tend to be very mature. They tend to be very artistic and creative. So I think it's a healthy mix. But when you have a child who is growing up under multiple guardians, because mom was never around, dad was never around, dad was shooting heroin, mom was prostituting, so they left me with neighbors and cousins and grandparents and my uncles and my nephews, right? So a child who is growing up under a constant changing of guardians and adult supervision, that is a traumatic environment. The child is not being placed with these adult figures because mom and dad are going on vacation, or because we have a very entrenched family system where we are very, very close-knit and tight, right? No, I'm talking about the parents who prostitute and do drugs, and they leave their children with other people because they need to go do what they have to do, right? What they have to do. That is what I mean. So frequent guardians and a constant changing of guardians can create a very traumatic childhood. Just think about it. Every adult has a different way that they view life, has a different set of expectations, has a different view of you as a child. And so they're going to treat you differently, right? Maybe Aunt Susu is not going to treat you like Uncle Bo, or maybe Uncle Bo is not going to treat you like Grandma Karen, right? Or maybe, just maybe, you're going to get abused by Uncle Bo, but you're not going to get abused by your cousin Tiffany. And so you're going through these roller coaster emotions and experiences, and you're not being validated, you're not being comforted, you're not being taken care of, you're not being protected. It's traumatic, okay? So frequent guardians. The other thing that I want you guys to think about is being forced to be separated from your parent. And what I mean by this is being forced to being separated from your close parent, and that could be through divorce, it could be through rejection, it could be through foster care, and it could also be through adoption. You're being placed in the foster and adoption system because your parent is an unfit parent, an immature parent, an emotionally detached parent. So you're being put in that system, foster or adoption system. Okay, you're being forced to separate from your parent, that one that you latch on to naturally, right? The one that you share a genetic code with and an emotional tie with. You're being forced to separate. Divorce and rejection. So the parent could be a mommy dearest parent. So the kind of mommy dearest parent that I talk about in this video right up here. They could be really cold and detached. And so they're rejecting of you. And that rejection of you is forcing you to detach emotionally and psychologically from your parent. And so that in and of itself is traumatic, right? And then divorce, right? Divorce separates the kid from that parent that they are close to, whether it's both parents or one of the parents. That could be very, very traumatic. I know my mom and my uncle had it really, really hard when their mom and dad, when my grandmother and grandfather divorced. And it was difficult because my grandmother fell prey to alcoholism. And I love her dearly. I lost her this year, and it's been very, very traumatic for my family. She did not have coronavirus, thankfully, but we were very, 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 very close to her nonetheless. And my mom and my uncle struggled a lot during the funeral this year and the burial and so forth. But they also struggled a lot when my grandmother and my grandfather separated. And my grandmother and my grandfather separated because of an affair that my grandfather had. And it pushed my mom and my uncle into the arms of my grandmother, who, out of depression, fell prey to alcoholism. And my grandfather went his separate way and had his new wife and her children, and then they had one kid together. But my mom and my uncle were like in the middle of two households. The household with my grandmother, who was an alcoholic for years before she stopped drinking, and then the lifestyle with my grandfather, who had created this whole new world for himself. And so that was a very traumatic experience for both of my mom and my uncle, because they were forced to be in two different households. They were forced to be in two different worlds that were so vastly different. And so the constant switch and change, and then the changes over time, really took a toll on the both of them. And I think it still impacts them in many ways. And I think that this is part of my own intergenerational trauma. It started way, way, way back with my own father, my own grandmother's families. But I think that intergenerational trauma fell into my mother and my uncle's lap. And I might talk about that a little bit more. I know I talk about it up here in this video here, guys, so go ahead and check that out. But being forced to separate from a parent or both parents because of divorce can be very, very traumatic. Okay. The next thing that I want you guys to think about is homelessness and extreme poverty. Homelessness and extreme poverty can separate you as well, because what it's doing is it's requiring the parent to make a decision. Am I going to be homeless and take my children out onto the street to be in the dirt and the soil and the fatigue and the changing weather conditions, in the dangerous atmospheres that I'm going to have to sleep in? Am I going to take my children into that scenario, or am I going to place them in foster care or adoptive care, or am I going to place them with a family member or a close friend who could care for them, right? So we have that angle of it. Then we also have extreme poverty, where kids are being raised in households where they don't have food. They go to bed hungry, they wake up hungry, they go to school, they eat, and then they go home and they're hungry for bedtime. They're hungry for morning time, right? They don't have food. They don't have their lights turned on. They don't have simple utilities. These kind of kiddos really struggle. I had a kid years ago that came into my office for psychotherapy, and he would come to me. This is when I worked with school districts. I was contracted with a K through 12 school district, and this particular kid came to my office, and I just loved him, and I loved to hug him, and I loved to laugh with him and play games with him. And sometimes I would give him snacks in the office because he was hungry, and sometimes I would let him just hang out on my couch and take a nap because he was tired. But the extreme poverty in his household left him fatigued, weak, hungry, and depressed. And so he needed a lot more from me than counseling. He needed food, he needed clothing, he needed a place to sleep. And I provided that place to sleep, and I provided those snacks for him. And therapy for him was not only emotional and psychological, it was also physiological too, because he got a chance to take a short nap when I'm talking to him. He got a chance to do a relaxation tape where I put that on, and he listened to it and he relaxed for like 15 minutes. So this poor kiddo was in a house full of extreme poverty, and then he ended up homeless, and I lost touch with them because they left town and so forth. But that kind of scenario, if you guys can relate, it's very, very traumatic. And I think we all have parents that struggle every now and then with finances. My family did. And my family's pretty good with income. We all have really good jobs and really good careers, but we still had moments where we struggled financially. Like, that's just life. That's who we are as humans. So we can all kind of relate. But that extreme kind of poverty, guys, is something that just takes you by surprise. You know, you're not ready to say, I'm going to have to sleep on the ground tonight. That is very, very traumatic. Or I'm going to have to sleep in a shelter with strangers that I don't know, because when you sleep, your guard is down, you know? So that is very, very traumatic. Okay, the next one, guys, is severe bullying and assault. Severe bullying would be being harassed every day, pictures being taken of you and your head being cut off and placed on somebody else's body, you know, being cyberbullied all the time, being stalked online, being assaulted sexually, physically, emotionally, psychologically. All of that is traumatic. If you had that growing up over the years, that was a traumatic piece of your childhood. And I'm not talking about somebody just calling you a name or someone, you know, kind of bullying you for a little bit, and then when they get in trouble they stop. I'm talking about being harassed constantly, being bullied constantly, being stalked, being assaulted. That is traumatic. All right, the next thing I want you guys to think about is unexpected grief. I think that's one of the most traumatic situations you could ever go through as a child, is that unexpected grief and loss. Losing a mother to a severe car accident, losing a father to a drive-by shooting, losing a mother to a drug overdose, losing a cousin that was very close to you, or a grandmother to a cancer or a health condition. Unexpected death, murder, grief, loss can be extraordinarily traumatic because, again, it's unexpected. The key word here is unexpected. It is not expected. You don't expect to go through the pain and the sorrow that you have to go through because, again, it's unexpected, right? You expect that your mother's going to be there. She birthed you. You expect that your father is going to be there because they were there during the birth process, or they were there to raise you, or your grandmother's going to be there for years to come. And when that ends unexpectedly, that is a huge shake to your world. So that's another thing that's traumatic. The next thing is home or domestic violence. Home or domestic violence. Now, what I mean by this is domestic violence would be you know, being hit or abused or assaulted or treated unfairly by your spouse. And domestic abuse or violence does not have to be physical. It could be emotional and psychological. Getting an ear beating because you said something that the person didn't like is abuse. Being called names or being cursed at because that person is in a bad mood is abuse. So that's very, very abusive, just like being smacked or hit or punched or assaulted would be, okay? And home violence, I think what I was getting at with that is growing up in a neighborhood where there's guns, growing up in a neighborhood where there's shootings and drive-by shootings, and where your house has been robbed or burglarized. So that kind of violence, okay, all of that is traumatic as well. And last but not least is severe neglect and maltreatment. And what I mean by this is a baby being born into the world and being left to his or her own devices, being left without any sensory stimulation, any communication from the mother or the father, whether that's intentional or unintentional. There are some mothers who can't give to their child because they have postpartum depression, or they're struggling with severe depression, or some kind of psychosis, and so they may leave the baby unattended to for hours. That is traumatic. There's a lot of neglect that can happen if a parent is not in the right frame of mind when the child is brought into the world. If we're not just looking at an infant or a baby or a child, then we can go to adolescence, right? If you're malnourished because you don't have the food that you need in your home because of homelessness or extreme poverty, that is an issue as well. All of these things can be traumatic, guys, and I want you to understand and kind of see it this way, that trauma is any situation that you do not have the inborn or ingrained abilities to deal with. It's a traumatic situation that you do not have the ability to cope with. It's something that is unexpected, or sometimes it's expected. Like, you know, maybe your dad is in the army, right? And you know that he could die, but you're just praying that he doesn't, right? That's expected trauma. You expect the possibility, but unexpected trauma, again, is like a murder, a death, a loss, lack of parental support, that kind of thing. Both kind of traumas we're never really prepared to deal with, even if we think that we are psychologically prepared, right? So I think sometimes we can think, okay, I'm strong, I'm smart, I can do this, I'm sensible, I'm logical, I'm rational, I can handle this. And it's not as cut and dry or as simple as we may think it is. And for children growing up in traumatic households, they really do not have the inborn tools to deal with what they're dealing with. Kids are very, very resilient. Let me throw that out there. Kids are very resilient. And some of them are extraordinarily smart and intelligent. But again, they're still children. And so growing up in a traumatic environment can lead to adult trauma. And we're going to talk about that in the next couple of videos, guys. We're going to talk about that in the next few videos. I'm going to talk on Sunday about bipolar parents, or parents who are dealing with bipolar disorder, and some of the traumatic things that can happen in that relationship. Thank you so much for being with me today, guys, in this video. I encourage you to give it a thumbs up if it was helpful to you. And go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you want to stick around with us. I will see you in the next couple of videos, which will be on Sunday. And I look forward to talking to you then. All right, guys, I'll see you then. Bye-bye.